And welcome back into another episode of Tribal Council Chat. As always, we are your hosts. My name is Bruce Heller, and let's get started. So we have a really fun episode this week. It's one
Yeah,
I've been looking forward to since we first started the show back at the end of May.
and
And
it's also a bit of a sequel to last week's.
yeah, so last week we did the Michelle episode, to Brett's all-time favorite player. We went through each of her seasons and then talked about kind of her legacy as a Survivor player. And then this week we're kind of doing the same thing, but it's the Amanda Kimel episode. My tied for my all-time favorite player. I've got my Amanda sweatshirt on right now for those of you watching on YouTube. Made by Lauren O'Connell, by the way, so shout out to her. And so we're going to go through all three of Amanda's seasons, kind of talk about them, her game, and after those, talk about kind of her Survivor legacy. And for that part, I have a really cool surprise for the audience. And so let's dive in. So Amanda's first season is China. She gets put on the Fei Long tribe. And the first thing I want to touch on is like day one, day two, right off the bat, she forms a really tight alliance, develops a number one with Todd Herzog right off the bat. Really smart person to pick for your ally there.
Absolutely. Yeah, she finds it way, and really one of the few examples we can see Amanda's game or Todd's game that really an alliance actually made the way to the end of Survivor, which isn't very common anymore.
Yeah, for sure. A lot of times we see these duos like this that form on day one. One of them ends up cutting the other one before they get to the end. These two, along with Courtney, of course, but it started out as these two. Then I feel like Courtney came like a day or two later, I think. But they controlled this season completely from day one to day 39. And so early on Fei Long, Amanda, like Courtney and some of the other women, were not the biggest fans of Jean Robert. Just, how he was around camp. He snored. I think we see a confessional with Courtney that he claimed he was always wanting to sleep next to Courtney and Amanda to keep him warm, even though he was a lot larger and had more to keep him warm than they did. But
he even made the wonder.
Yeah. So the first time Fei Long goes to camp, goes to tribal, I think it was Todd. The original thought was, let's get rid of Jean Robert. But one of the things with China is the team that wins reward challenges gets to kidnap someone from the losing tribe. And Leslie had been kidnapped to Jean Hu. And Amanda realizes Leslie just came back and openly admitted that A, she bonded with the other tribe better than us, and B, openly admitted that she gave the other tribe strategic information. So that's somebody that needs to go. And in a 6-2 vote, Leslie ends up being the first person voted out of Fei Long, kind of Leslie's own doing. I don't know why you would openly admit to either of those things, but
It's a good strategic move from Amanda because even though like in episode one, Leslie looks she might be able to be a vote for both Amanda and Todd. At the same time, it's like you don't want to risk that so early in the game when someone's clearly proving a bit of an erratic player with less strategic sense than you'd like if you're going to go all the way to the end of Survivor.
yeah, and as irritating as Jean Robert is, he's always going to be that irritating. You can take him out at any time, and he can call himself big and bad or bad boy or whatever he called himself that Courtney laughed at him at Tribal for. But I mean, you can kind of get him to do what you want. I get the vibe from him if you can talk him into it. So they get people like Leslie out who might be threats later, and you can kind of use Jean Robert to your advantage, then take him out when you're done.
Mm-hmm.
And so, jump ahead a little bit in China. We reached the swap, and China's my favorite season. I hate the way they did this swap. And the way they do this swap is both tribes get tree mail that says pick 2 people from the other tribe. And the 2 people that get picked go to the other tribe that picked them. So Fei Long loses James and Aaron right off the bat. And
Yeah, I hate this swap as well because I mean, theoretically, if you wanted to, you're just encouraging people to throw challenges with the way the swap is designed.
that's exactly what we see happening because Jean Hu knows
Yeah.
they're down in the numbers pretty badly at this point. And we see PG and Jamie do just an incredible job of throwing a challenge. What, literally throwing one of the puzzle pieces away that Jeff picks up afterwards and hands to them and says, you lost this, not that it would have mattered. And then Aaron gets voted out, and you can tell James is in trouble. So, and this is kind of something I want to touch on, that they kidnap James from Jean Hu because Fei Long wins reward. That version of kidnapping is still a thing. And by that point, Amanda and Todd had found the hidden immunity idol at their camp. They went through the clues and found it. Unfortunately for them, Frosty was with them when they found it, which is kind of a funny scene. But they find that they give that to James and send him to go get the one from Jean Hu and save him and give him 2, which is a really smart move for them. Keep their person in, keep Fei Long's numbers up. And so we reach the merge, and James rejoins the Fei Long Alliance, and they vote out Jean Hu and start picking off a couple of Jean Hu members. And then they eventually do, and this is kind of obviously a lot of the stuff Todd and Amanda they did together, but Jean Robert finally becomes aware of, oh, hey, there's idols in the game. I'm going to go look for one and try to figure out who has it. So they vote him out for finally becoming aware of things that everyone else knew way ahead of time. But
yeah, you're only about 4 seasons behind Jean Robert.
Hey, he's great television, but he's so irritating. I don't know what to do with him. And so we reach day 26 in China, and we see Amanda and Eric become a little bit closer on a reward, which is really smart, honestly, because the Jean Hus are just getting picked off at this point. These are the people that are going to be on the jury. Try to make a bond with them. And so we see that work because the jury vote she gets in China, the only one is Eric's. So good for her on that.
I'm making bonds with guys named Eric.
Yeah.
We'll talk about another one later.
This Eric is a little bit less gullible than the next one, but. And so we reach final 7, and this is kind of, for me, like the big memorable move she makes in China, as she realizes there's 7 people. James has 2 idols right now. He has a clear path to final 5 easily. And so she engineers a plan to blindside James.
Yeah.
And got Todd, got Courtney to go along with it. And PG comes to her freaking out, trying to save herself because she thinks she's next. And Amanda does a really great job here of not telling PG what's going to happen, but just saying, calm down, act like it's you, you'll be fine, without actually giving away the plan and risking James finding out. It's a brilliant move there.
If she gives it away, James could easily keep one idol, give one to PG, and flip it back on Amanda and Todd.
Yeah. And the plan ends up working. James goes home with both idols, and very briefly until the next season holds the title of dumbest survivor moment ever. So
good claim title.
Yeah. Which it's funny because the Eric thing happens in Micronesia and James is just sitting there laughing, saying, I'm not the dumbest anymore. Woohoo. It's fantastic. So
Yeah.
James goes home at 7, and then PG goes after that, I believe. And we end up at Final Four. Yeah, I skipped Final Five, but we're at Final Four. The final immunity challenge, which is between Amanda, Todd, Courtney, and Denise Martin. And I have
Great
actually
challenge that was.
I have my Amanda pop figure here with me that like Todd Herzog made that I bought because it's from the final immunity challenge. Let me pick this up. For those of you watching on YouTube, here you go. Got the little dish stacking thing. Really cool challenge. I wish they'd do that again sometime. And so Amanda wins final immunity, and Denise goes home at 4. So we have this trio that have been together almost the entire game.
That's 3.
Yeah, these three, these guys ran the game together. I've heard Todd say, and I've heard Courtney say that Courtney originally was just there for the pre-jury vacation, but once she actually started playing, the three of them ran the game together from day one. And that's not knocking Courtney. I've heard them both say that she was there for the trip at first, which is kind of funny. And so we reach final tribal council, and honestly, I feel like Amanda had a pretty good shot coming in. Like I said, her and Todd did almost everything together. They planned everything together. But Todd kind of, I feel like, had some jurors not too happy with him, is my guess. If you look at how people came in with their questions towards him. But here we are, final tribal council. This is the one flaw in Amanda's game. She just doesn't own her game very well.
Also, too, though, it's not even at fault of Amanda, at least in my opinion, because nobody knew what Todd was going to do.
No, Todd had the best final tribal council ever, but
absolutely.
Two things can be true at once. She definitely kind of crumbled a little bit. She at least could have gotten second place instead of third.
For sure. Listen, nobody really came in and did what Todd did. Everybody would just be like on an apology tour to the jury for the first 14 seasons.
Yeah. And we see one of the Jean Robert scenes we had seen was him tell Todd, if I'm blindsided, I'm holding you personally responsible for this. I know you and Amanda are doing, like, you guys are the power, but I'm not holding this against both of you. It's just you. And Todd convinces Jean Robert, tells him exactly what he wants to hear, convinces him to give Todd his jury vote. And then we learn at the reunion that Todd was completely playing him. That it wasn't entirely true, the things he told Jean Robert of why he got voted out. And just masterful job knowing what people want to hear, knowing what to tell them, and taking advantage of that knowledge. And that's a credit to how well Todd was playing socially, that he built bonds, that he knew people that well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we fast forward to Amanda's second season, which is the very next season. Survivor Micronesia, fans versus favorites. She's one of 10 returning players coming in. And right off the bat, we kind of see this couples alliance form as we see this kind of flirty thing between James and Parvati. And we see what becomes a full-on showmance by Final Tribal Council with Ozzy and Amanda. And those two pairs come together. And there's another alliance that's forming. And we have Cirie Fields in the middle. And we end up seeing Amanda and Parvati take Cirie out on this boat ride and say, we'll go to the final 3 together if you vote with this current alliance we have right now. And they get Cirie to join them, and they kind of have control on the early favorites tribe, which is something I want to highlight, by the way, is that a lot like with Todd and China, throughout Micronesia, we see Amanda and Parvati talking, just the two of them, planning these moves, discussing them in depth with each other before putting them into effect or before even talking to anyone else. Like, it really is the Black Widow Brigade as a whole gets credit. them with Suri as a trio gets credit, but I feel like it really was these two as a pair
Absolutely.
steps ahead of anyone else.
By far.
And we
And
see,
especially for the way that they can make moves on their own and still trust each other and have everything work out in the end.
yeah, and I'll touch on that aspect in a second too.
The two of them are really running the show.
So we after like we talked about, after trying to sway Eliza to their side and failing, they bring Suri in. Great scene with that boat ride. They do a really good job talking to her, and the three of them all forming a deal that benefits all three of them. We hit a swap, and Amanda and Parvati are split from each other. And on the new Molotov,
This is probably my favorite swap strategy, I think, that's of all time.
from Parvati's perspective, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. So on one side, you have Irai, you have Parvati joining with Natalie and Alexis and kind of saying, hey, I'll get Amanda and Suri to sign off on this, and the five of us will be a thing from merge forward. Putting Amanda and Suri in an alliance they have no idea they're in, and that when Amanda finds out that she's in, she's not exactly happy about it at first.
Yeah.
And so,
from Natalie and Alexis's perspective too, you also have a situation where they're now in an alliance with a favorite that they've never seen play.
yeah. And so that's what's going on iRise. Parvati's kind of joining with those two girls and forming power over there. On the new Molotov, we kind of see Amanda and Suri bond a little bit closer than they had. Without, because I feel like they were both closer with Parvati than each other. Yeah. And we kind of see the two of them come together on new Molotov and find a good spot where they had control of the new Molotov, obviously with other people. Two people can't have all the power, but pretty comfortable position there. And they would vote out the fans that had come over to Molotov, Joel, then Chet, then Tracy, and then right before the merge, we see Amy go home, who on the original Favorites tribe was in the other alliance. So
I'm just saying because we talked before about Jean Robert and his antics, but Joel has to be one of the worst players of all time.
Yeah, I can't stand him. Both times I've watched him on the show. Joel is just awful. Like at least Jean Robert, there's some funny to it because you see Courtney just laughing at him at Tribal for calling himself a bad boy, and Courtney just so blatantly like sassy making fun of him. Joel's just awful. Like we don't even have anything to laugh about and have fun with there. Like he's not Colton, but he's still pretty awful.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, you look at obviously there are only two people, Amanda and Suri, but you look at what happened on New Molotov post swap. Joel, Chet, Tracy, all three fans, and then Amy, who was on the other alliance on Original Favorites. Those two came to power pretty quickly on the New Molotov. And so we reached the merge, and Amanda's reunited with Parvati. And like we said, we learned that Parvati has been building this 5-person girls alliance completely without her knowledge. And I mean, I was watching YouTube videos of confessionals last night, and we really see that Amanda really wasn't happy about this alliance at first. And part of that was the showmance with Ozzy, because there's a confessional where she says, Alexis likes Ozzy also, but me and Ozzy have, I forget how she phrased it, but talking about the things she and Ozzy already had, that she wasn't really worried about Alexis. But obviously, as we see later in the season, she gets over that frustration. And going back to when we were talking about Amanda and Parvati as a duo, and you said they both would have moves happen that the other person wasn't aware of, but always came together. This is kind of the biggest example of that in my mind, as we see Ozzy blindsided in the early merge. And I'm kind of confused about who knew what here, because I've heard Parvati say on a podcast I believe, on Drop Your Buffs. Shout out to that podcast. That Amanda knew the Aussie vote was coming. They were playing good cop, bad cop. She was just pretending not to know. Long story there, but I'm just kind of summarizing. But if that's true, then I don't get why we have these confessionals of Amanda talking about how hurt and blindsided she was by the Aussie vote. Because with the confessionals, none of the other players are there. You're not playing anything up. You're just talking to the producers and to fans. So I kind of don't know what I believe about what she knew about the Aussie vote, but I mean, either way, that's a big move.
I mean, only Amanda knows for sure,
Yeah.
but over time, it's easy to have no idea.
Yeah. And this is something I like too. We've talked about this on the duos episode. I talked about Amanda and James, and they had just played all through China together. Despite the fact that she blindsided him, they playing together on Micronesia so far. Ozzy gets blindsided, and James is the person we see her go to and talk through the woods and just rest her head on his shoulder as they walk through the woods and just be honest and be vulnerable. Like, my friends hurt me, they blindsided me. And like, I love that bond there as we see them throughout all 3 seasons they played.
Especially how, like, we were just talking about that big move in China and that this bond was still able to survive through another 2 seasons.
Yeah. And I mean, in the first season, she directly was responsible for his blind side. And in the second season, she didn't engineer it, but had a hand in him going home again after them being in the same alliance. Yet we still don't see him be bitter about it. We see them come back for the third season. We'll talk about this in a little bit, where they're still like this, like they're still each other's. And I think they were each other's number one in heroes versus villains. That heroes tribe was kind of a disaster, but we'll get there. And so Ozzy, we talked about the Ozzy blindside and the aftermath from that. We do see Amanda come back together with the girls and move past all the hurt from the Ozzy thing. We get a little bit down the road, and the target they were going to go after has immunity. So Amanda's kind of the target for being a threat and being likable. And we see her looking for an idol most of this episode. And I like what production did here, because we don't see her find it. And we almost always, if an idol is found, we see it get found. And we see this talk even before Tribal of Suri telling Amanda, I don't like doing this, but I'm voting for you. I can't sway the numbers away from it. Yeah. And so we get to try. We never see Amanda find the idol, looking like it might be over for her. And Jeff says to play like, now's the time to play it if you have an idol. And she says, yeah, about that. And let me see if I can do the quote. She says, when I told you guys I didn't have it then, so I didn't lie to you guys. But I found it, and she's swinging it around as she goes and saves herself and plays.
Watching this back, it's almost like some of these, like, advantages that we don't know about being edited into the new era, but all the way back in the old school game.
Yeah, I love the shock factor of we didn't see her find it, which we always see they always show us the person finding it. So her standing up and swinging it around at Tribal being how we learned she found it was so exciting. Like, and so she plays that, saves herself, and all the votes except hers and Parvati's were for Amanda. And those two voted for Alexis and send her home. And again, to me, that highlights how strong this duo was. Because whereas we saw Suri's conversation with Amanda is, I don't necessarily want you to go home, but this is what the numbers are. I can't fix it. I have to vote for you. Whereas with her and Parvati, and my guess is she probably told Parvati about the idol, but either way, like those two are like sisters. Parvati was gonna vote with Amanda either way. She wasn't gonna write her name
Exactly.
down.
And even if she did tell her, it's like there's a five, but within this five, there's a bunch of smaller alliances.
Yeah, within the five, there's the three, and then within those three, Parvati and Amanda is a duo, and then there's Suri. And
And
I'm
then
not
there's
gonna
a
go. I'm not gonna.
Natalie and Alexis duo too.
I'm not gonna go too far down this rabbit hole, but I see it said a lot that like, oh, so, like people will compare Suri's exit at Final Three here and say she got screwed over because it switched from a Final Three to a Final Two. But either to me, like you went to the Final Three with two people that are very clearly have closer relationships with each other than they do with you. Like
I'm
nothing.
I'm just gonna say out there, in my mind, I know sometimes, and I won't jump down it too far either, but I know we sometimes see discussions of, oh, this was unfair or it was a twist or whatnot. Final twos have been done in Survivor since Richard Hatch versus Kelly Wigglesworth.
Yeah,
So if you're not prepared for a final two, that's your fault. And that goes for people playing today.
and to be fair to Suri and the Suri fan base, and I do love Suri, by the way. I feel like on
Oh, yeah.
look, I probably come off as I don't like Suri because like Suri and Amanda get pitted against each other a lot on Survivor Facebook. But I mean, the final two was a twist. That was kind of a last minute thing. But you still went to final three with two people that very clearly would choose each other over you. Like, if I feel like what would have happened had Suri gone with the two like even at final four gone with Natalie and tried to force a tie just because the other two are closer to each other than they are to you. Even if you're thinking it's a final three, they've done everything together and then bring you in after they make the plan, I feel like. So just I mean, I get it. They were together from the beginning, but going to the final three with those two is kind of on Suri to me. That just wasn't a great decision, bringing two strong players like that to the end.
Point, if it was going to be a two, Sui was probably out of luck no matter what. Because let's say she makes a big moves and goes with the fans, she probably still gets voted out at three unless she wins immunity.
Yeah. So, yeah, and we weren't there. Suri is incredible at this game. I'm not going to second guess her decision making. She's very clearly good at reality competition in general. But no, she didn't get screwed over in Micronesia. Game Changers is the only time she legitimately got screwed over. But so Suri's out at final three. Let's move back a little bit. Because at final five, we have what, in my opinion, is the dumbest move in the history of Survivor. And we have Eric giving away immunity, which still lives in infamy, by the way. We just finished season 44, about to go into 45. That was season 16. And CBS and Jeff Probst still love to throw out Eric references and throw out the video of him saying, I would like to give individual immunity to Natalie. But let's look at went into that for a second, because that's another thing that gets debated a lot amongst fans is whose move was that? And to me, like, it's a team effort. It's not, doesn't happen without, if any one part of that isn't there, it doesn't work.
Exactly.
Like, Suri is who came up with the original idea to attempt it. Natalie is who started getting the bug in his ear, trying to convince him. And we even see, like, when Natalie first comes to Eric and pitches the idea, he says, there's no chance I'll ever do that, which, stick with that, please. But, and so, Natalie does the convincing, and then Parvin and Amanda apply the heat at Tribal Council to push it over the edge. Without any part of that, the Eric move doesn't work. And Natalie probably goes home at 5 instead of 4 would be my guess. And so,
Some quick points on heroes versus villains. Anything before we have to go into a final segment?
yeah, heroes versus villains will be a shorter one because she doesn't go as long. Real quick, final immunity. Amanda wins that again. Final tribal council again, kind of crumbles. And so, heroes versus villains. There's not a ton to talk about here.
Oh, Liza says today she almost made it a tie, which would have been
Yeah.
mind blowing because there was no one else on the jury to come third.
That's true. That would have been really interesting to see what happened. So we'll move into and Align Blindside First Boot doesn't take a ton of time. So we'll do Heroes versus Villains and Legacy really quick. There's not a ton to talk about with Heroes versus Villains, honestly, compared to the first two seasons. Amanda was one of the few people that I felt like was legitimately like playing and trying to play well on the Heroes tribe. And so that kind of was what it was. Her and JT were basically the only two trying to make moves and trying to do things.
Just wasn't a lot though, and after James went home, she did as well as she could.
Yeah, and we see James get hurt in a challenge, and like I've talked about earlier on this episode and with the duos episode, just seeing how strong that care was her and James had for each other. Sorry. We see a confessional where James is still getting checked out by medical. He hasn't returned to camp yet. And Amanda's talking about not knowing if he's coming back or not. She's legitimately crying just because of the care they've developed for each other over 3 seasons.
Exactly.
And their bond was really cool. We see, after the merge, we see this, after being such a tight duo in Heroes and Micronesia, we finally see a conversation between Amanda and Parvati again. Early merge in Heroes versus Villains. And it's about as awkward as it could possibly be, given the circumstances. It just kind of
Parvati said that these points, like this point of the game, was some of her lowest days out of any season she's ever done.
Yeah, and I mean, it's kind of clear Amanda's wanting to stick with the heroes and trying to flush Parvati's idol. Acting not a strong suit here. It's kind of obvious she just wants Parvati to play the idol.
Yeah.
But so, and then other than that awkward conversation, the only other thing that really sticks out to me is just the funny moment of her and Danielle and Colby on this Treasure Island reward. And long story short, her and Danielle end up in a cat fight for this idol clue. And they ask Colby to referee. And for some reason, instead of helping out the person and siding with the person that's on your tribe, Colby just kind of throws his hands up. I wasn't paying attention. Don't ask me. Yeah. Like, if I'm Colby, like, help the person on your tribe, side with her. Like, not that would have made a difference. Danielle still would have tried to keep the clue, but at least try to help her. Don't just, like, sit out. But that was a very Colby move at that point.
Let's jump into your legacy surprise because I really want to get that in. We can do Ally Blindside First Boot online.
Yeah, we might still have time. That doesn't take very long. And so and Brett knows I did this. I reached out to Todd Herzog and just kind of explained the episode and asked if he'd be willing to send a quote. And he did. Shout out to Todd. He's amazing. You don't know what this quote is yet. So he says, Amanda is strategic, smart, and athletic. She's quick on her feet and adapts to any situation thrown her way. Her one downfall, and it's not a negative trait, it's the reason she lost twice in a row, is that she guards her heart. She struggles to let people in until she's known them for quite some time. Sometimes it made her appear cold or standoffish, but in reality, she keeps herself from getting hurt. But in the game of Survivor, making people feel like you're genuinely connected is key. Amanda has this laugh that's contagious, and it's real and from her heart. When you hear it, you know you're one of the lucky few she's let in.
Well said, Todd.
Yeah.
Yeah, that defines it perfectly. She's one of the most well-rounded players of all
Yeah.
time, but just struggled to get those couple of votes in that she needed to really solidify herself as one of the all-time greats.
And having that insight of having your heart, like that she guards her heart and isn't quick to let people in, that's not negative at all, but that kind of explains the two bad final tribal council performances. And so, leading into that, and 4 minutes left, so I'm just going to say this really quickly, then we'll jump into our game. Best to never win, in my opinion. Like, I know, like, with a strong majority of the fan base, the consensus answer on that is Suri. So this might be kind of a hot take from me, but Amanda's the best player to never win in my mind. Like her and just do the head-to-head comparison with Suri and stuff like this is why I feel like it might come off that I don't like Suri. So no shade at her at all. But Amanda and Suri are pretty equal socially, pretty even standing strategically, and Amanda's better physically. That's about how I look at that. So, and I think for like your answer for best to never win is even different than mine. It's Sesternino, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, so 3 minutes left. We will jump into our game of aligned blindside first boot. So take it away.
Let's jump into it and we'll just do names so we can get it over. Your three names are going to be players that Amanda was with at one point in time. I'm keeping with the same theme as last time, players she was against,
Oh boy.
on and off at least. So your options are Jean Robert,
Hmm.
Eliza, and um who did I have as my heroes versus villains? Danielle, of course.
Oh yeah. I think I will align with Danielle because Jean Robert would just drive me crazy. I wouldn't have the patience that Todd and Amanda had to just kind of tell him what he wants to hear and then convince him to go along with our plans. But so I don't get rid of him, align with Danielle, and I just Eliza's kind of sporadic. I don't know if I can trust
Nice.
strategically. And so the three names I will give you are the winners of each of her seasons. So Todd, Parvati, Sandra, go.
I will align with Parvati, as I've said before, in when I'm stuck in winners, because I know her a little bit outside the game through the virtual world. I will blindside Todd because I think he would respect it on the jury.
Oh yeah.
And I will first boot Sandra because she's never been on a jury before, so who knows how she's going to react.
Yeah, but watching her be on the jury would be hilarious, I feel like. Like I want to see that.
Yeah.
Um
Anyway, it was an amazing episode. Thanks so much, everyone, for listening.
yeah.
Grab your torches and head back to camp. Side note, well, we have 1 minute left. Semifinal tonight. Come on, England. It's coming home.
All right, bye guys. Thank you to Todd for helping us out.